How can embracing self-love and finding a supportive community to trans how can embracing self-love and finding a supportive community transform the experience of infertility from one of isolation to one of strength and connection? What role does sharing or your struggle play in healing and building resilience? We'll jump into that when we return. Welcome to another heartfelt episode of the Making of a Mompreneur show, where we explore the theme of self-love and resilience during our special Self-Love September series. I'm your host, Rashida Green, the founder and CEO of Get Right Coaching, host of this wonderful Mompreneur HQ community, and the creator of the Digimompreneur Academy, where we help moms who are determined to find more time, money, and financial location freedom start, grow, and scale online businesses so that they can build the life of their dreams without neglecting themselves or their families in the process. And we do that through coaching, content, and community, and of course, now through the Digimompreneur Academy. Today's topic is profoundly personal. So instead of focusing on taking notes, I encourage you to open your heart and, if needed, keep some Kleenex handy as we share stories and offer words of encouragement. We're honored to have with us today Melissa Thomas. Melissa is a devoted wife, mother, and registered nurse from Charlotte, North Carolina, and is not only an advocate for community outreach through her church, but also the author of Breaking the Silence: Personal Stories and Reflections Through Infertility. Her book, combined with her professional background in education, foster care, and healthcare, establishes her as a compassionate expert on this sensitive topic. According to the World Health Organization, infertility affects approximately 1 in 6 couples in the United States, and the emotional challenges can be significant. We recognize that this topic might be triggering for some, and we want to approach this conversation with sensitivity and support. In today's episode, we'll be discussing self-love through infertility, finding strength and community. Melissa will share her personal journey and insights on how embracing self-love and building a supportive community can transform the experience of infertility. If you or someone you know is navigating infertility, we hope this episode offers comfort, encouragement, and valuable perspectives. We want to welcome our special guest to the show, Melissa.
Hello. Hello,
Hi,
hello,
Melissa.
hello.
Thank you for joining us today on the Mompreneur HQ. And we thank you again for breaching this very sensitive topic with us during Self-Love September. Now, someone said might think, "Oh, couldn't you do that show on another time or on another show?" But no, self-love sometimes may be impacted or affected or changed or dwindle during this particular time of infertility when there are so many questions, so many unknowns. And so before we get into all of that, come on, I know I just did a whole bio intro, but I want to know more about Melissa. Introduce yourself to the group.
Okay, hello, mompreneur family. My name is Melissa, like Rashida so graciously said, and I am originally from Philadelphia. Born and raised, so go Eagles! I'm a Phillies fan,
Okay.
and I've been in Charlotte for about 16 years now. So
Mhm.
originally from Philly, in Charlotte now, and I am a mother, a wife, and wear all of those, those hats. I'm a nurse as well. That's my profession. I am a registered nurse. And like you said, this topic is just very, very personal for me. Yeah. I'm trying to think, is there anything else I need to say?
You all right? You're all right because we have quite a few minutes that we can go into
Oh,
some things that I'm sure we're going to be peeling the layers of this onion while we discuss our topic today: self-love through infertility, finding strength and community. So, just to start off the back, I didn't quite call it out, but I did mention that you wrote this book. So you are also an author.
Yes, and I did not, shame on me for not adding author to that. I didn't go through the list and all the hats that we wear, right? But yes, I am an author as well. And so I don't know how quickly we want to jump into it.
Do it. Share a
Okay.
bit about your personal journey and how this you were inspired to write this book.
Yes, let's see, about, let's see, 7, 8 years ago, I found myself, my husband and I, I had a daughter, and then we were looking to have another daughter. And, when you're growing up and you have your life that it's planned out, or in your mind it is, you have an idea of how things are going to go. And, because of what we are used to seeing and experiencing in life around us, when the time happens or comes to, to grow your family, you just think it's going to naturally happen because that's what it's supposed to do, right? Why wouldn't it? And
Mhm.
so when, we were trying to have our second daughter, things just weren't going as smoothly as we would have liked. And initially you don't think too much of it, but then, you add on a few factors of age. At this point, I'm a nurse. And then you begin to realize, you know what, maybe I need to go seek some help, or, talk to my doctor about what's happening. And that's when, I'll say, the ball started rolling.
Okay. At it being in the nursing industry, you see all these things happening and you know how it's going. What's your particular field in nursing? Do you specialize in pediatrics or?
So adult. So I'm typically in adult care, and I'll say, prior to, when I say I'm a nurse now. Prior to going into nursing, I was in education for a period of time after undergrad, and then I did foster care social work, and so I went back to school for nursing. And at that point, when I was going through this, I was on neuroscience. I was on a neuroscience unit, but I have since worked in different areas of nursing. Nursing the great thing about the field is you can go in different directions. And that's just one of the areas I was in at the time, but I've done quite a few things.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been around children in education and you've been in nursing. And so you're seeing all these different people, all this scientific information about, birthing and having
Right.
children and women. And now you've had this one child and you're looking to experience hey, might
Yeah.
be a little sister or brother.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
so, with that being the way that it was happening, and you said in our minds, we have this idea of what should be happening and our plan of what's supposed to happen, but it doesn't always go that way. So, tell us what led you to the next part of this story.
So I was, after my daughter, I wanted to wait, take a little time before we, pursued having another child. Birth control was in place. And so when we decided to grow our family, remove the birth control, and we did what we needed to do to try to bring this baby into the world. And after some time of with that happening, about a, let's say, maybe it was about a year. And we still hadn't become pregnant. And I said, okay, maybe I need to talk to my doctor. And so at that point I go to the doctor, and they're like, okay, sometimes it takes a little while for the birth control to be out of your system, for things to regulate. And so let's give it a little time. So we gave it some more time. And at this point, again, I said, I have the knowledge of, okay, physiologically, what's happening, where I am with my age. And it was okay, I need to go back. Let's go back. I don't want to belabor this. I don't want to take as much time as maybe the doctor is implying, because at this point it had already been over a year. And so giving it a few more months, and at this point they're like, okay, do you want to be conservative, or do you want to take it slow? And I'm like, well, I feel like we've been conservative because it's already been over a year. Let's be more aggressive. And after that point, this is when she said, okay, let's, do some blood work. And then she referred me to an infertility specialist. So that's kind of the quick version of how it played out,
Of course.
Yeah.
And as all of this was going on, what was in your mind as we talk about self-love? I know, again, speaking about it being a personal experience, when we were dealing, I don't know if you know, but we were married for 6 years before we had our first daughter. It was a whole conversation as well. And during that time, it's like, what's wrong with me? And I
Right.
can't have no baby. And, so for me, it was just really initially, it was fun because we were young. So
Yeah.
we got to go on vacations and we got to go here.
Mhm.
And we was traveling 3 times a year. And people were looking like, oh, wait a minute, when y'all gonna have kids? That's the most insensitive question of the day. But I'll talk, I digress. We'll
We're
come
going
back.
to touch on that.
We'll,
Yes.
we'll come back.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like fun. And then it was like, okay,
Yeah.
when we're gonna have these babies, right? And and there was a lot of self-doubt and self-esteem issues and
Mhm.
seriously transparent, what's wrong with me?
Right. Right. And
All these folks around me just dropping babies 2 and 3, and
yes.
what is happening here?
Yeah.
So did you have any of those type of experiences during?
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it sounds like you were in my book and you're reading it, my words, because I did have that. Again, when I talk about how we have this preconceived idea of how our life is supposed to be, and that includes, for most young girls, you're going to get married at a certain age. And when you're done, you're going to have babies, and you're going to be done having your babies by this age, and you're going to live happily ever after. And there's nothing there to say otherwise to that, because these are one of those topics that we don't talk about. And so, yes, there were feelings of, okay, what's wrong with me? So much of, I think, as women, who we are, how we feel about ourselves at times when you're talking about fertility is linked into our womanhood, right? I am created to reproduce and bring forth life. That's what makes me the beauty, a part of being a woman, right? That we have that ability to reproduce. So when that seems like it's halted or stalled and you're not able to do that, you do begin to question, like, okay, what's wrong with me? I'm supposed to be a woman and I can't have a baby. Or, why, God, why is this happening to me? I had periods where, you look at other people and, it seems like they can just look at a child and they reproduce and it just comes natural, easily. I'm going to say that for them. And, for some that's struggling, when you're going through that, you feel like, it feels unfair. You kind of, sometimes you live your life, or you try to live your life in a way where you're an upstanding citizen. I my faith is what guides me, so I'm walking with the Lord and in Christ, and trying to live out these, do my due diligence as a Christian, and be an example or an extension of God's love and grace in the world. And so then when here it is, I'm ready to do this and it doesn't happen, you're like, well, wait a minute, God, you know what's going on, what's happening, why not? I've done
Mhm.
this, I've done that. So you do have those feelings of, where your self-worth at times, you feel is connected to my ability to bring forth life.
Yeah, I totally understand that. But we do know that we are still human, we are still woman, we are
Yes.
still Christian, we are still all of the things, even if we are not physically able in that sense. Because, I just want to share that because we do feel we are created for that, but sometimes the purpose that's laid out for us, or the plan laid out us for our lives, may not entail that. So I definitely want us to not walk away feeling like we're less than because we're not. But that is a real feeling.
It is a real feeling,
It's a real
and and
feeling.
and on and in the book, I talk about that, because how we come to motherhood, as you grow and you go through, you realize that might look different
That's
for
right.
each woman, and that's okay.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter how you get there, if that is where you desire to be, whether that is through naturally delivering or birth, is if that's through adoption, if that's through surrogacy, if that's through, fostering a child, whatever the
Blended family.
blended families where you can be a bonus mom, all of that is a part of the beautiful tapestry of motherhood.
That's right.
And no, by no means, it is not just one way to arrive there. And those are some of the stories that I talk about in my book, that some of the women, they've gone through infertility, or they've had challenges and they've journeyed through it and have dealt with it, but they ended at motherhood in different ways. It looked different. It wasn't just that way. So, how we get through infertility and grow through it, that's all a part of the journey. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've gone through the beginning stages and we know that there were some things happening. So can you tell us, when did you end up having another child?
So after going to the doctor and, of course, having several appointments, and I don't want to give the whole book away, but I will just talk about it. Once I got to the infertility specialist, they started running more tests, and they found out that, or I found out that I was premenopausal at 34 years old. So it technically would have been a little sooner, because I had gone a year. We had been trying and was unable to give birth. And so that was what the problem was. And like I said, you have these ideas of how things are going to go. And, you're definitely not thinking that at 34 years
Mm.
old, they're going to
Right.
say I'm perimenopausal, and that my ovarian reserve, which is my egg supply, had already significantly declined or decreased. With that, we tried all of I wasn't a candidate for I wasn't a candidate for IVF, and I tried a few other things, and though I was unsuccessful through those, but yes, I did end up having another baby by the grace of God. I was able to conceive, and I say that she was just my miracle baby, because I had gotten to the point where I had exhausted all of my resources, all of the things that I knew I could use or take advantage of, right? All of my resources. And at that point, there was nothing left to do. And so it was like, all right, you're going to have to, God, help me through this time, this period, these emotions that I have behind it. And it was at that point that I just kind of surrendered what I wanted. And I was open to the possibilities of this being different, if that was what God had desired for my life. And so for me, I feel like that's where the self love during the adversity really kicked in, during that challenge, during that time where, I was, because at that point you can't do anything else, right? Everything else is like out of your control. And
Mhm.
it's all out of our control if we think about it, but I think there's a work that we feel like we still have to do, right? Those
Mhm.
are taking advantage of the resources, talking to your physician, seeing what else there are things that I can do that could potentially help in this situation. And then once all that was exhausted, it was like, okay, God, I can't do anything else. I'm giving this to you, help me through this time. And I think that's when I surrendered. I really tapped into what I needed to do to just be more whole, whether that was physically, taking care of myself physically, emotionally, spiritually. And yeah, those are some of the things, some of the areas I had to kind of focus on.
Okay. And in focusing on that, what would you say were some of the things that you did to improve or to acknowledge self love during those times? You mentioned that you did some things and some inner work search. So, what does that look like for someone who is experiencing infertility?
That looks like acknowledging that I think being in the moment and acknowledging your emotions of, okay, I'm okay or I'm not okay. Like giving ourselves that space to be in the moment of what's happening. Things are, when you're dealing with infertility, there's a lot that's going on. You have outside influences, like you said, people asking you, like, when the next time, when are you guys going to have a baby? You've been married all of this time, when is this going to happen? Are you guys trying? And you don't realize it's not until you go through it, because I've been on the other side of that. I've been the one, and I'm gonna be honest, I have been the one to say, oh, when are you guys having kids? And early on, right? But once you go through, you're like, ooh, that's not the way to approach it. And you don't know. A lot of people come from a good, genuine place, just asking, oh, when are you going to have some babies? But they don't know the struggle and the challenges that you've been through, and how every time you hear that question, it just kind of digs at you. And
Yes.
it's, it just,
Chalkboard.
it does. You write that chalk like, it just digs at you. And you're like, oh man, if you only knew. We've been
Yeah.
trying for, whether it's 6 years, some in the book, 10 years. You just don't know. So I'll say, you're dealing with so many influences. Like I said, you're dealing with the outside influences, you're dealing with that internal struggle, that voice of what's wrong. And then if there is something wrong, managing the health complications that may be preventing you from moving in this area. So I feel like one way is giving yourself the
Grace. Yes.
that, okay, this is where I am, but this does not define me. Okay. And we have to be intentional about that, because we begin to internalize. Again, we're internalizing all of this. And as you internalize all of these feelings, these emotions, it has negative connotations behind it. It can take you down a path. You can feel really lonely and isolated. It can be very dark in that space. So you have to acknowledge those feelings, but then also, and give yourself that grace, but then also, I think, take a concerted effort to say, okay, this does not define me. And I need to prioritize me aside from this diagnosis, because there's still so much more to me than what I'm going through.
That's true.
Taking the time to do things that you enjoy, if that is, and those were some of the things that I did. I still enjoy working out. And so spending time in the gym was therapeutic for me, and being okay with taking that time away. I have a husband at that time, I had a husband and a child. And I think there's a piece to self-care that's a little bit selfish, but that's okay. Because you have to, if I'm not good for me, if I don't take the time that I need for me, then I'm not going to be my best self for my family or whoever else that I'm connected to.
That's right.
And taking that time to take care of my physical, working out was something that I enjoyed. Walking, running, whatever, I like being outside. So getting some of that natural fresh air, but moving, that was good for my mental, but that was also good for my physical.
Okay.
And then I'll say, connecting with my family, my circle, my friends, they really helped me down during that time. So having that sisterhood, and I talk about that in the book, that sisterhood that you can rely on, that you can connect with, that can kind of check in with you when you need it, right? When you're kind of laying low, having that person that's going to reach out to find you and say, hey girl, I haven't, heard from you. So staying connected to my circle of friends, but also kind of keeping them in the loop of what I've been experiencing as well. And so that helped me.
That's a good point that you raised, because what I found sometimes is that, since it is such a personal topic, that some women won't tell anybody that they're going through this struggle for fear, for shame, embarrassment, or feeling, again, feeling less than. So when you talk about community, did you feel at first hesitant about telling people because you didn't want nobody in your business, or you didn't think they would understand? Were you able to then open up?
Yeah, of course. In the beginning, I did isolate myself. I wasn't talking. So I am talking to you from the other side, and giving you the some insight on what helped in the beginning, and what helped and kind of what brought me through. But initially, no, I wasn't very open and forthcoming with everyone about what was going on. My husband knew, my parents knew, probably told my brother, my siblings, that kind of thing. And, you have, it might have been one or two friends that to my core, that over after going through a few things, I slowly begin to pull back some of the layers and let them in, But it is a very, and I think that's one of the reasons why you feel so isolated, because you're not sharing, you don't want anybody to know for all of those reasons.
Mhm.
But that is one of the reasons why I wanted to write the book, because I want people to know that there is a community out there. You don't have to feel isolated. And I think the more that we're able to talk about it and pull back the layers, it kind of takes some of the shame off of it and lets you know that, hey, like you said, 1 in 6 couples are experiencing infertility. So, as isolated and uncommon as it seems, it really is pretty common. It's happening, and not just with the women, not just women are experiencing it, men are as well, but we're talking to our women. So it is happening. And so I think the more we can talk and have platforms like this where we can share and know that, hey, it's nothing wrong, there's a community that wants to support you. You don't have to go through this alone. I think the better we'll be able to just kind of go through this time less isolated, maybe not as depressed as maybe I might have felt,
Yep.
So
I know exactly what you're saying. And so I really do appreciate you coming out and sharing with our community, some ideas on how they can show themselves some love, and mainly by showing themselves some grace
yeah,
during this period, and letting people know that community is really like the way that you stay out of that isolated place and feeling like you're alone. You don't have to tell the world, you know, but you should absolutely tell someone who you can confide in, so that they can not just be in your business, but be a supportive help, a listening ear. Because I do know that there were some tears that were shed, in silence. And
yes,
and just when you could have had someone, even if they were just there,
just
to
there,
help
just
you
to
and to
listen.
support
Yeah,
you. Again, we know that this is a tender topic, but we hope that you were
yeah,
able to get some insight, some feedback, and some support, and knowing that there are others who have had this experience. And just to reiterate that you have to show yourself some grace, and all the science in the world, there are options, but motherhood will look different for every single woman, and that there
absolutely.
is no one mold, and that if it's going to be adoption or whatever the other options are, I would say be open to that, but definitely be open to the Holy Spirit and what God has to say for you in your life. So thank you again, Miss Melissa. I really appreciate you joining us today to speak about this particular topic. And I know that you have a book. Just give us the name of the book one more time, and where people can find you.
So the book, I don't know if it'll show for you, but the book is Breaking the Silence: Personal Stories and Reflections Through Infertility. You can find it on Amazon there as under Melissa Thomas, Breaking the Silence. That's it there. And in there, it's, stories like Rashida said, however you get to motherhood, those stories, I believe that if this is a topic that connects with you, you will find yourself and hear yourself in the words in this book. There's so many different stories in there, and just how they made it through on the other side. Yep.
Thank you. And you can reach her at IG at Melissa_S_Thomas, or you can just check her out on Facebook at Melissa Thomas. Thank you so much. And we usually end our show with 3 real quick questions.
Okay.
So whatever comes to mind first.
Okay.
So let's go with spring or fall,
Fall for sure.
coffee or tea,
Oh, I need my coffee. Absolutely.
Geno's or Pat's. She said no trick questions. No trick
You
questions.
said no trick questions, and I don't want to offend anybody, and I'm from Philadelphia, so
Mum's the word. Okay, you heard it.
I'm
Word
not.
on the
I'm
street.
not going to answer.
Melissa says she ain't answering.
I'm not answering. You got to give me another question. Give me another one. That was a setup right there. No,
Oh my
I can't.
goodness.
I can't. I can't. I cannot
Uh
answer that question.
Bentley or Ferrari?
Oh man. Okay, I'll say Ferrari.
So you the sporty type. You like
I
to go
am.
fast.
Like to go fast. Fast and
Okay.
sporty, yes.
Oh, goodness. Well, thank you again for joining us, Melissa.
Um,
So, if you have not dropped any comments or questions in the comments in below this show, you just might as well go ahead, cheer on and support our guest today, Melissa. And we will, if you have any questions, we'll definitely look to address those questions, especially if you're looking for opportunities for support groups for infertility, women experiencing infertility. Let us know. We'll have some research done for you. And of course, if you're interested in purchasing the book, make sure you go ahead and check that out on Amazon. In the meantime, we're wrapping up our Self-Love September series, but we want you to come on back next week, same time, 7 p.m. Thursday, and we will be glad to provide you with some more awesome information and people who are going to help build up your life as a mom entrepreneur. Thank you. And until next time.